Hello, so this is the Volume 8 review video of Classroom of the Elite, one of my favorite light novels. Without further ado, I wanna get right into this. So let's do this step by step. First is the monologue of the Horikita Manabu. For the first time we hear Manabu's thoughts about the future and the reason he joined this school. And those thoughts don't exist, surprisingly. From Suzune we of course know that Manabu was an absolute genius from a young age. So it's obvious that many expectations must have been held for him. Expectations from everyone for him to be an exemplary student. But impressively Manabu doesn't feel pressured by these expectations and thinks being an exemplary student and fulfilling others' expectations is only right. In return of carrying these expectations, though, Manabu doesn't carry within him a desire of his own. He has no particular plan for future, he only aims to become what is expected of him. And then in his monologue he talks about Nagumo Miyabi, who is completely opposite of him. One who acts as he wishes without concerning himself with others' need. For him it's all about the entertainment, what can give him thrill. And in his school life he has found that clashing against Manabu gives him the thrill. Understanding Nagumo's personality, Manabu knows that after his graduation Nagumo will want someone else to entertain him. In pursuit of his thrill he would most likely get many students expelled. Although Manabu understands that he had almost given up the thought about after his graduation because he realizes his mistake. Which we later learn in the light novel is his inability to nurture a suitable candidate for the student council president. He feels regretful about that mistake. At least until the day he met Ayanukoji. And one more thing, although everyone in third year class admires Manabu, he hasn't made a single friend he could connect with from the bottom of his heart. I am pretty sure if Tachibana heard that she would be heartbroken. Anyway, now on towards the first chapter, which starts off with student of now classroom, traveling in a bus to the location of the next special exam. In alphabetical order Ayanukoji and Ike are seated next to each other, and the scene that takes place between them is something I find very freaking relatable. Since volume 6 Ike and the others have kept their distance from Ayanukoji, which sorta bothered him at first, but then he became part of the Ayanukoji group so he didn't mind it much. And now even though they were almost friends in the volume 1 to 3, I say almost because Ayanukoji said that he always felt like he was looking from outside the group, now they are nothing but casual acquaintance. Ike doesn't pay much attention to Ayanukoji and instead talks to his friends at the back. Rather than say things were awkward between them, I would say the friendship between them, for at least this and a couple more volume to come, was completely forgotten just because they hadn't talked much recently. Anyway, Chabasira sensei explains the rules and we get to see that the class had matured a bit more than the last time. As they paid attention to her and didn't needlessly complain in the middle of her explanation. Of course some students grumbled about being companions with the kids from other class, but then again it would be weird for the whole class's environment to change when only a handful of them have truly grown. Things like the penalty, the reward, is explained, and as soon as the explanation is done, Harada decides to take the microphone and asks everyone's opinion about how to tackle the exam. This kind of thing is something that only they need to do. Aikino's class most likely does the same thing, but the difference is that they don't need to do it, they chose to do it. Class C just lacks unity and a Touré leader at this point. Moreover, Chabasira sensei's advice to not split points equally among themselves just weakens the bond of unity that this class holds. Now while this is going on, Ayanukoji texts Horikita Manabu, and unrelated to that he later receives a message from Horikita's sister who asks if he has any plan for this exam. Just a routine checkup for her now, I am sure. Ayanukoji was uncooperative as always though. And then Harada decides to ask Horikita to lead the girls in this exam, which was quite the obvious choice. Horikita have gone through some character development, agrees, and also realizes that right now the class doesn't trust her as much as they trust Harada. Which is fully understandable since up to this point Harada has been nothing but devoted towards the peace of the class. And Horikita decides to choose Kushida as her sub-leader, a choice which was agreed upon by many. I would like to throw some of my opinion on that later in this video. Anyway, although Kushida hates Horikita to death, she still has an image to maintain, so she got no choice but to agree. In preparation for this test, Ayanukoji also messages Kei to be a tool for him. Although he quickly decides that in this exam he won't act and just observe. Now the basics down, let's pace up. They exit the bus, girls and boys get separated. The boys have to quickly make a team. Class A's strategy was already in place, which wasn't surprising. In this volume I was actually really surprised that Class B didn't have any strategy to win in the place. I get being careful to not get anyone in the class expelled, but before this I didn't think much of Aikino's pacifist side, but this volume made me wonder about it. Anyway, groups started forming. Yamuchi was the only person in the class a group. Then there was the thing about Ryuan stepping down, which was so out of the blue for the other characters that they were skeptical of it. And also Ryuan had a bad rep for implementing dirty tactics, so nobody wanted to take Ryuan, and Ryuan didn't take the initiative to join any group. He had been in a way forced to stay in this school and didn't care much about anything after his defeat. Then Akito stepped up and decided to include him in his group. Akito's character sometimes made me wonder if he also has some secret talent. Akito used to go to the school next to his and he has confidence in his fighting ability. And his actions shows he cares about justice in general, so him offering help was nice, in a way. It could be that he had heard some things from his middle school about him too, because at that point Ryuan's character was portrayed in the worst light to the other characters, so people should have all hated him. Of course Harada was an exception, but that was mainly because he couldn't bear to see anyone getting isolated. Then there is Kisei, whose character gets some serious development in this volume. Taking the previous volumes in account, I won't say I dislike him, but I can't say I like him very much either. He does get irritating in some scenes, but the reason those actions of him gets even out in my opinion is because a character like him is very relatable in a sense. We see more of him in Volume 6, and quite frankly I have read many a similar character to him before, so I was not surprised, per se, with his nice side. It made sense for Yukimura to be like he was, but of course some actions of him later are things I can't quite say were right. So Yukimura, Kuenji and Ayano Koji from Class C were together in the leftover group with Ishizaki and Albert, who were both wary of Ayano Koji and knew about his abilities. There was also Hashimoto from Class A, who will do anything to graduate from Class A quite sketchy character, but considering the rules of the school his actions can't be said to be wrong. In fact, from a strategical point of view, him pre-planning in case Sakyongi losses is quite smart. I also want to talk about Ishizaki, who is more of a casual pseudo. Of course, after being in care of Suzune, Pseudo had matured and gotten smarter, but Ishizaki I think is more charismatic of sort, not as hot-tempered, and his loyalty towards Ryuan is impressive. Not in the same way as Pseudo following Horikita's order of course, but kinda off, they both would do what they are told by them. And they both also did shitty things in the past. Albert is a Chad. I don't understand him though. His character took change near the end of Volume 7 as someone who doesn't like fighting but felt a thrill when he fights under Ryuan's order. And hence followed him. But of course he also, just like every other person from Ryuan's class, did a kinda of a shitty thing in the past. He roughly treated Ibuki on the ship but was also friends with her. So that kinda bummed even more. He is a bit more tool-like than Ishizaki in my opinion. Then the groups were formed and Nagumo Miyabi openly challenged Horikita Manabu. People from Manabu's class were quite fed up with that. Nagumo obviously had tried to compete with him before and they didn't like it much. Nagumo is obviously the most villainous student character. His monologue in the later volume obviously showed him as manipulative and frankly, a womanizer. Not even to mention him objectifying every girl in the student council as his property. But at the end of it all he fits well for the plot. Manabu agrees after putting forth conditions, which were basically that the battle was with him alone and he shouldn't involve anyone else. Manabu was of course wary of Nagumo and thought that by competing with him at this stage would prevent Nagumo from going after anyone else. Unfortunately, of course, we know what happens to that. Then the next interesting bit is about Kuenji, who acts just as bizarre as ever even in front of Nagumo. Nagumo offers him the student council position but he turns it down. Now Kuenji obviously is self-absorbed and doesn't give a damn about graduating from any class. Is what we had been led to believe before this interaction. Nagumo does reveal the strategy of Kuenji buying points from third years, which would undoubtedly place him in Class A. This part I think is very important because beforehand Kuenji said he didn't care about which class he graduated from, but then in the beginning of the year he hangs out with third-year girls and obviously takes steps towards his plan. There was a contradiction there, as Ayano Koji had thought to himself when he found out about this too. And yes, even though Kuenji didn't seem to mind getting his strategy exposed, it is still an interesting contradiction which leads to many theories and plot points. Yukimura steps up as the leader, and although he is an academically gifted student and quite strict-mannered person, we found out that he isn't quite the leader material in this volume. He has trouble connecting to troublesome students, and although has some good ideas about how to proceed, he just can't lead the people of the group. Yukimura suffers because of his poor physical ability too, and all this living in summer school puts a whole lot of load on him. Ishizaki was naturally displeased by being in the same group as Ayano Koji. Moreover, he hated Kuenji's personality, and since it was hard to take his anger out on both of them, Yukimura became the natural target. Not quite mature, but then again, it's first year of high school. Ayano Koji helped him here and there, both being friend and all. But Kuenji's personality causes just more trouble. There is also their food making duty, which makes their life hell. The card game with Nagumo, the third-year Class B, and Vice President Kiriyama. The fact that the third-year Class B and Nagumo were together should have given Ayano Koji an idea about them plotting something. In fact, if it wasn't for Nagumo building trust for so long, that moment should have been looked at with suspicion. At the last round, Ayano Koji joins them, while Kuenji brazenly refuses everything Nagumo asks of him, and in the last 1v1 against Nagumo where he had the joker which was marked, Ayano Koji made to grab the other card so to win, but Nagumo stops him. He clearly wanted to know whether Ayano Koji had figured out the card trick and see some of his ability. Ayano Koji makes his move to win because frankly, even if he did not chose the joker, the probability was enough to not have it be unusual. And we also see Kuenji figure out that Ayano Koji is the one who defeated Ryuin just by him grabbing onto his arm. Which just proves that Kuenji is an oddity who, maybe surpasses Sakyangi. Hashimoto helped a lot in bringing the group together while the students of Class B were literally NPC. I see that it was their class strategy to stay low and focus mostly in not getting anyone expelled, but I didn't even know any of the Class B guys. I think it largely fits the remark about how Ayano Koji once commented that Aikino's personality is so bright and she brings the class together in such kind way that it kills off the students' individuality. The future of this group of there was looking quite bleak until Hashimoto shared his personal story in the dark of the night with the whole group. They all talked about things they usually wouldn't, mostly because they couldn't see each other's faces, and Yukimura let it all out, mostly about how frustrated he was with himself, how he couldn't do anything in the island test or the sports day test. He looked down on fools like Sudo, just like Horikita of the past, and then they were more useful than him. Also talked about his sister. Since the mother had left them, I am sure the sister took care of him and their bond was strong. After that night, things took a turn for the better. While this goes on within the group, Kei relays information to Ayano Koji. There is some wholesome teasing. Now the information brought by Kei, which we now know might concern Tachibana's group, but the thing is, there is this scene. Nazuna Asahina, the amulet girl. Ayano Koji cleverly uses the pure coincidence of the past to try connect with her and extract info about Nagumo. Nazuna feels grateful, finds him a cheeky first year, and also think it's destiny since the amulet was supposed to protect the owner. She gives information that she thinks is not gonna harm Nagumo in any way. And as Ayano Koji extracts the information, here is how that part ends. Combining this with the information I got from Kei, the accuracy increases even further. I decided to step it up a bit more. Now here in this scene he could have just been getting more info about Tachibana, but it is unlikely because he already had it, or he may be asking something off of Nazuna that could be revealed in the later future volumes. It could be a plot point or just me overthinking. Anyway, on towards where we see the sneaky side of Hashimoto as he meets with Ryu, and mostly to confirm whether he has truly stepped down. He did mention he could betray Sakyangi for him since he had a winning chance, but seeing him back out outs a pause on his plans. Ayano Koji follows Hashimoto from their room and quietly listens to them. Then enters Horikita, Manabu and Nagumo Miyabi, who were already having a chat about something. They bump into each other and Ryuin is just as rude towards Nagumo as he is to everyone else. They talk, but things turn up a bit when Nagumo mentions Ayano Koji being a notch above the likes of Sakyangi and the other first years, at least according to Manabu. Manabu denies that, but Hashimoto has suspicion in his heart, and from then on he tries to find more about the supposed abilities of Ayano Koji. There is also the scene of Ayano Koji and Manabu meeting at night, Manabu being the one who had called out to him. They talk about things related to exam, but the two main points about this interaction is first of all when Ayano Koji asks Manabu about Nagumo being trustworthy, and Manabu immediately says that Nagumo won't go back in his promise. Ayano Koji finds it weird that everyone thinks of Nagumo as someone so trustworthy. The second point, as their conversation comes to an end, is that when Manabu leaves, Ayano Koji looks at him thinking to himself that unless he himself made a move, Manabu was going to lose. So that means Ayano Koji realized the plan early on and had a chance to take action to save Manabu but chose not to do so. Which fits his personality perfectly. Then we come to the girls group. Firstly, Horikita, being the one who led the girls, had Kushida be in her group. She stayed close to her. In the previous volume 2, Horikita invited Kushida out to coffee to get to know her better. She basically tried to emotionally sway someone like Kushida to come to a compromise and then also have her actively take part in the special exams along her side. Moreover, as her monologue comes to an end, Horikita remarks that how if she had to choose between Ayano Koji and Kushida, she would have to choose her. Which is in fact quite hilarious. Not like her strategy is stupid, it is one way to go, although it is a bit naive to think someone as black-hearted as Kushida, who carries so much hate inside of her, would be swayed just by someone being by her side. It's kinda of like how a socially awkward person would go about making friends. Horikita also though realizes that Ayano Koji is smart, she still underestimates him, thinking Kushida will be more valuable for the class. But in keeping Kushida in check, she made sure that she wasn't planning any strategy to have her and Ayano Koji expelled. There is also Aikino's side, where she doesn't actively participate and lead people like she usually does. It was all part of her fail-safe plan. But of course we all know that in the long-run game Ichino's played it a bit too safe, and this volume was the start of it for me. Friendship also blooms between Hiyori and Mi-chan. Which was quite weird, since beforehand it was mentioned how Hiyori didn't have any friends in her class, but she made friends with Mi-chan quite easily. Then there is of course Tachibana, who had joined a horribly wrong group, realized her mistake and was suffering. She even cried the day before exam where Ayano Koji found her, but since Tachibana didn't think highly of him, she turned him away. Then the exam approaches. The Yukimura group did well enough on Zaizan and written test. In the really everyone gave it their all, following Yukimura's strategy. Everyone except Ayano Koji and Kuenji, that is. Exam finishes with everyone feeling a bit satisfactory with their performance. Manabu's group came first. So everyone thought he won, but then in the girls' side it showed that Tachibana had in fact fallen in a trap. At that moment Nagumo threw away the trust he had built for 2 years. He had used that trust to lower Manabu's guard. He had prepared this exam just with the intention of winning against him. His obsession with Manabu was quite interesting. And the thing about Manabu is that his ability is quite undefined, we don't see much of him outsmarting someone. In this case he had been careless, and although it largely had to be blamed upon Tachibana, their class did fall from class A to B, but in the end special exam for the 3rd year's Horikita Manabu won and led his class to a but even that we don't get to see. So it's quite hard to put Manabu anywhere in the ranking. And while Horikita is dumbfounded by this turn of events, Kei remarks how everything happened as Ayano Koji had said. So he did predict what was gonna happen. Even though Nagumo told Manabu that in the whole school there was nobody who could see through his plans, Ayano Koji did. And he also said that if Kei was put in the same position he would save her. And then there were the incidents which had great impact in the future volumes. Sakyongi bumping into Yamuchi and falling down later came to bite Yamuchi ass. Now in her monologue Sakyongi remarks how she had Ayano Koji witness an unsightly sight. So rather than just her falling, she was also more concerned with falling in front of Ayano Koji, who she shows mixed emotions towards, that may just be love. She did say about in her short story that she felt like a maiden in love. Although she is more eager to compete with Ayano Koji. Irie and Haruko didn't have much role in here. The Ayano Koji group just met once in the cafeteria to discuss the group's affair and how tough each of them had. And Akito also said Ryuan was behaving well. The most important incident is the one that later branded Ayano Koji as the king. He had the longest sword in the entire school year, and that ability was one he couldn't quite conceal. It was a clever tactic implemented by Ryuan which made Ayano Koji gain attention among the boys and also gain their respect.